The second one is going to be dealing with the relational dimension of architectural practice in the light of climate change and as a mean to also become part of the climate change discussion and action. The first speaker is going to be, I'm going to introduce the two speakers now, so we can do a more kind of vibrant, let's say, dynamic. Camilo, García, and Diego Barajas, Husos, Colombian-born, and they've been practicing in different places, from the Netherlands to Madrid now. Husos is an architecture and urbanist studio with a transdisciplinary focus whose work consists of design projects, research, and academic practice. Their projects include Host and Nectar Garden Home Atelier Building, El Croquis, in Cali, one guy, one building, one vegetable garden at the home they share, the backyard, the very recent project that they did that was widely published, among many others. Founded in 2003 by Camilo García, Mark at Berlage, and Diego Barajas, PhD at the ETSAM, and Mark at the Berlage, and also you both studied at Los Andes, right, in Bogota before. Husos is based in Madrid and regularly operates between Spain and Colombia. Husos' work has been widely published in international magazines and books and has been featured in places such as the Venice Biennial, the Venice Biennial in the year that Emiliano Gandolfi did this exhibition on experimental and alternative practices that was so influential in the long run. The Zumthor Award for Sustainability and Humanity. Their work was also in the Oslo Triennial that was curated by people that are very connected to, actually, Luis Alexander Casanova was around here, yeah, there, and that was also very celebrated, the After Belonging Triennial. And it's been basically awarded everywhere and exhibited everywhere. I must say that the garden house in the garden building for butterflies in Cali is being considered one of the first examples of architecture that expanded as a transmedia architecture and was also connecting the discussion about labor, the discussion about ecology, and the discussion about media in a very unique way. So I'm very much willing also to see what's the way that the two practices can be clarifying what is that architecture can do for climate change and is doing within climate change and is climate change.
Okay, hello and many thanks to Andres, David, Sia, Amale, Lila, Lucy, and all the people that has made this event possible.
Okay, so there are two aspects of climate change that we believe are equally important. The first lies in understanding that climate change is interconnected with multiple realities of our everyday life. For example, with certain desires linked to some ideas of progress or even beauty, with which we can agree or not, but in any case, we have to take into account, as we are going to see in some examples, regarding fashion or apparently banal experiences like shopping. As such, climate change from our point of view needs to be approached from an ecosystemic perspective and seeing how it relates to a large set of aspects of our daily lives. The second lies in understanding that our impact on the climate has partially been the product of a number of power relations that are to a large degree asymmetrical and that have been strong determining factors in our construction as society. These are relations that have frequently involved domination and violence towards nature and also towards members of our own species. For example, we might think of the extractivist dynamics of the colonization and domination of territories in various parts of the world and the transformation of their climates, a phenomenon that continues to the present day. This includes the subjugation of other sentient species, such as animals or human communities linked to those territories. It also includes other forms of violence towards groups considered to be subordinate, such as racialized people, women, non-binary bodies, and many others. From our point of view, in order to tackle the colonization of the biosphere that has led to climate change, we should not only mitigate its consequences, or adapt to it, but we also should go to the roots of this phenomena to see what has caused a multiplicity of colonizations and also micro-colonizations and the related violence, whether natural or social, between species relating to race, gender, and so on. So we could say that we can truly develop a new relationship with the climate through tackling that imbrication of oppressions, as some lesbian Caribbean feminist thinkers would call it. These two aspects of climate change lead us to think that even though this is clearly a very big problem, we believe that it also represents an opportunity to revise the whole web of power relations, but also dreams and desires that makes up our societies. And perhaps it is also an opportunity to reinvent our climatic and social relationships, to build these as care relations and as new forms of affection and unforeseen kinds of togetherness and solidarities. In this task of transforming our relations, which would eventually lead to new relations also with the climate, we could identify at least 3 sets of actions that we believe can help us from an architectural perspective. First, we'll be taking care of micro-realities. The second, fostering new transformative imaginaries. And the third, mediating in the construction of imbricated communities. We think of the work we do at Husos as a set of micro-laboratories that are incomplete, are imperfect, but which perhaps can still offer some tools that could be useful in these considerations. So we will focus on the Host and Nectar Garden Building project, but briefly mention 2 other projects here highlighted in yellow in the image. This project is located in the tropical Andes, in the city of Cali, in the western part of Colombia. It is one of the most biodiverse parts of the world. In the map on the left, it shows the 12 megadiverse countries, in which also Ecuador is included. But it also is part of a region, the neotropical in dark green, which according to different sources shows a sharp decline in a sharp species population decline, with South and Central America suffering the most dramatic decline with 89% compared to 1970s. This loss is partially triggered by the same action that caused climate change and by global warming itself. So this project is a textile atelier house and a host and nectar garden building for insects, butterflies, and birds that are part of Cali's ecosystem. We carried out this project with a community of workers, neighbors, biologists, and entomologists, both from Cali and Madrid. It started as a private commission for a group of women who run a small atelier from their home, where they produce textile garments and hand-painted fabrics. They needed a new building, both as home for 2 of them and as their workshop. In order to prevent the atelier owners from getting big loans or mortgages, the building had to be designed to be built in stages. It needed to be flexible and adaptable to their small and unstable economy. A perimeter external circulation was designed, connecting spaces independently from one another. So this layout has enabled different configurations in time. In the building, we adopted the morphology used in some Caribbean towns, in which houses are separated 1 meter, or 3-4 feet or so from neighboring buildings, an effective strategy to create cooler areas in between buildings. In this case, it also gave space to a larger vertical garden surface on the sides of the building, which helps in controlling sun exposure and humidity. This complemented by cross-ventilation throughout all interior spaces, creating a continuously cool temperature. So no AC or no fans are needed, which is unusual for Cali, where the average maximum daily temperature is 29 degrees Celsius, 85 Fahrenheit, which is and with an average maximum humidity of 81%. So it's basically always feeling hot, warm. This is a project. This project has been a platform that allowed us to test and publicize botanical experiments, which have been carried out there for more than 10 years. The first phase was built in 2005. These experiments were related to an architectural membrane, a material composed of nutritious plants that host caterpillars and nectariferous plants that feed the butterflies, certain birds and also other insects. So here's Lorena, she's in the nursery, like working with some Aristolochias and Passifloras. It was a collective work together with biologist Francisco Amaro and Lorena Ramirez and the atelier workers, and with the advisory of the local zoo. So while the building was designed as a shelter for different species, it functioned at the same time as a sort of informal biometer, given the fact that the presence of butterflies is a sign of the status of a given ecosystem, as they are great natural bioindicators. Being located in a biodiversity hotspot where the largest amount of day butterflies per surface in the world is concentrated. So it additionally served as a sort of a branding strategy for the atelier, anchoring its identity with Cali's ecosystem in its sort of micro-global expansion of sales. A careful selection of plant species was made together with the team, so we created these cards. They classifying the plants in relation to butterfly and insect species, one per plant, also whether they were nectar host, whether they were bushes, or climbing plants, are also according to the demands of sun, exposure, water, pruning requirements. And here they're positioned in the building. We created a system for the bush plants to grow out, and a metal mesh mostly for climbers. And a system of maintenance and irrigation was also designed. We can see here a map, again, of the tropical Andes, which is a hotspot for biodiversity. A hotspot means basically that it's a place where a lot of biodiversity is concentrated, but is highly threatened. So Colombia is up here, and that's Cali, where the star is, which is the second most biodiverse country in the world. This map shows in orange color the presence of bird endemisms of 3 kinds, and in black dots, the areas of intense human activity. So this explains an enormous pressure on all kinds of resources in hotspots where human settlements and natural biodiversity are coexisting next to one another.
More and more urbanization and land transformation processes due to the expansion of arable land for agriculture, with all of its consequences on ecosystems and global warming, and reducing and limiting habitats for wildlife. In this project, another architecture was tested, which tried to reestablish a less extractivist relationship with the territory and with other animal species, in particular with those still non-domesticated, such as insects and most birds. Rather than seeing them as resources to be exploited, as it has been repeatedly been the case in the so-called agrologistic project, as described by Timothy Morton as the largest design project ever formed, here we explored the possibility of a new relationship, instead one based on care and on affection through a situated work of gardening. This project included both the design of the building itself as well as long-term responsible gardening actions laid by the atelier workers with the participation of neighbors and visitors. For example, when customers, suppliers, or neighbors came to the building, they were offered free seeds or seedlings related to the local ecosystem, together with information on gardening and the environment from these postcards that had been prepared for visitors. Also during workshops, ideas were shared about how to take care of flora and fauna, or even during fashion shows where informative leaflets were distributed, and this collection was called Butterfly Wings. At the same time, through everyday routines related to caring for the flora and fauna, a social construction took place, as well as the building of bonds of affection between the people going in and out of this building. In any case, the social here can be understood as a construction not only between humans, but among different species. Gradually, the people inhabiting the building changed their imaginaries towards the caterpillars that ate the plant leaves, which were traditionally perceived as pests, but as the workers knew they would become butterflies, they started to look after them and care for them. So together with hummingbirds, for instance, these insects started to perform as a kind of Trojan horses, carrying with their social desirable aesthetics a broader ecosystemic agenda. Thus, they have helped introduce new imaginaries towards, for example, less commonly desirable species such as beetles, moths, and caterpillars within this small community of workers. These microactions and experiments sought to recognize the home space, but also the city, as an imbricated community of workers, plants, birds, and insects. The home atelier was sold a couple of years ago, and new inhabitants have moved in. The project now faces a new challenge about the kind of relationship the newcomers will have with the plants, insects, and birds. And as of last year, it didn't seem very promising. Host and nectar plants' membranes were quite neglected. But something interesting is happening outside of the atelier. One of the women of the original atelier moved to a new location nearby and refurbished a house, making a host and nectar garden in her new place. So the project has therefore continued growing in new locations and is also present in other actions, even if they are small ones, that have emerged from it one way or another. During the last years, we have known about other neighbors, friends, and visitors using host and nectar plants in their balconies, gardens, and family events. So this is, for example, a wedding with host and nectar plants used as adornment for the dining tables and as presents for guests to take home and probably plant.
So this project is part of a series of socio-bioclimatic exploration we've been conducting in different projects over the past 10 years. When we say socio-bioclimatic, we mean explorations that engage with the climate, both in environmental terms, but also in terms of the social atmospheres or social climates that architecture can produce and or interact with. If in the garden building, we explored the relation of an architectural membrane with urban biodiversity in the project called One Guy, One Bulldog, One Vegetable Garden, and the Home They Share, this exploration is broadened towards the ecosystem of water and its recycling that feeds urban flora, although in a smaller scale. It consists of reusing and updating a small 46 square meter flat in a residential building from the 60s in Madrid. It's for Jaime, a doctor working in emergency room, and Albondiga, his dog. So the project is composed of microactions that include, among others, a vegetable garden that functions as a thermal barrier, which does away with the need for AC in the summer, which is increasingly hot in Madrid. It features summer curtains to shade the home and the plants, and also winter transparent curtains that create a sort of greenhouse effect in winter. It also includes soft, cool cushion islands for Albondiga, a rescue bulldog whose man-made breed is extremely sensible to high temperatures. So these refreshing cotton hemispheres allow air to circulate in between and give the bulldog a place to rest. Apart from the bedroom, which is here in the right, the project also features a multiple-use periscope capsule, which is this in the left, that alters and transforms the conventional uses of the living room into a place for siestas, or as a bed for overnight guests, or a projection screen, or for receiving more intimate visitors. Indeed, with regard to occasional encounters, the living room is often a central place in gay sexual culture, reserving the bedroom for closer relationships. This is the irrigation system of the vegetable garden, made up of an exposed micro-landscape of tubes and filters that treat the water from the shower, creating what could be a desirable, replicable prototype, in this case responding on a domestic scale to the critical scarcity of water in an increasingly dry region like that of Madrid. These maps show the certification trends. In fact, over the course of this century, 80% of Spain will be at risk of desertification, and large cities like Madrid put an enormous pressure on regional water sources. Housing is responsible for 70% of the water consumption in Madrid. This set of actions were designed to help us rethink our social interactions and our relationships with energy and nature in densely populated cities. At the same time, creates a space for other human and more than human body narratives in the domestic space. In this project, we explore new socio-bioclimatic possibilities around other masculinities and the idea of alternative post-heteronormative spatialities in the home space. We examined these ideas again in another project called Beyond Heteronormative Suburbia. This is a semi-rural location in the mountains, 80 kilometers from Madrid. It is a home whose design tries to respond to different everyday needs of a gay couple and their extended transnational family. It is part of a series of architecture domestic projects we have been doing during the last years, in which most of the structure is timber from forests, which follow a set of protocols which are aimed to dealing with them as responsible managed biodiverse ecosystem and not as monoculture tree plantations. In this case, the wood comes, most of the wood comes from a special Spanish forest near Soria, which is 200 kilometers from the site. And this is a project in which we try reconnecting not only with the biodiversity of the plot itself, but also with that expanded plot in which material cycles of a building construction operates. So here we see some images of the prefabrication process, and here is the current stage of the works. So to conclude, in order to face the problematics of climate change, we should acknowledge the specific and imbricated situations composed around it. This can be achieved through a situated work that takes care of its micro-realities as much as the multiple relations of interdependence and power that shapes them.
Architecture has a direct material component. By being inserted in our everyday, it has among its main abilities the construction of imaginaries as well. Imaginaries that we believe are necessary to transform our relationships, including our relationships with the climate. Climate change is a collective problem. As such, it is also an opportunity to revise and to reinvent our relationships and ideas of community, recognizing the imbricated communities we are part of, composed of different forms of existence and different but still interconnected struggles, environmental and social ones. In our point of view, these common imbricated grounds also have to be thought at different scales, from the microcommunity of a man, his dog, his tomatoes and other vegetables, and the water landscapes of which all three depend, or those of a dispersed network of neighbors, people and insects around a building, or on much larger communities. But the architecture in different scales and through different mediations, tectonic and non-tectonic, ones has the capacity to facilitate the blossoming of new extended communities, giving them a place and representation, opening up space for new relationships that are also very much based not only in collective imaginaries, but also on affections. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much addressing the issue that we're discussing here, and full of possibilities, ideas, criticality, design and aesthetics, and everything that architecture has been activating and mobilizing through design, but that is now articulated differently in facing a number of changes of paradigm, I would say, that we're now discussing today. I would like to start very directly with a question that has to do with the role of architectural devices as kind of elements that can re-articulate the social And that's something that it's very much in both presentations. The possibility of thinking architecture through an ecological perspective, as Camilo and Diego defended, in which basically there's no way to separate a part of the design from the way it performs socially, politically, economically, biologically. And that's something that, of course, has its traditions in architecture, but it's also sort of a kind of game change way of explaining, doing, and understanding architecture. So maybe we can start with this. This kind of relational, materially relational, ecosystemical way of thinking of architectural devices as elements that articulate a number of realms that otherwise could be articulated differently.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think that for us is very important to try to understand and to be aware of all dimensions, scales, possibilities, but all the dimensions involved in every architectural device, regardless of its scale. And because whether we are conscious or not, it plays a big role in different kind of spheres, in very multiple and even contradictory kinds of spheres. And so if we are aware of all those dimensions, maybe we can embrace them better, and we can somehow be a driving force for some kind of transformation, which is not material, but it can be also immaterial, social, etc. And for example, even sometimes very small architectural devices like a tomato can be very transformative in unexpected ways. For example, something we didn't mention, but in the case of one guy, one bulldog and one vegetable garden, we were very much worried about the socialization of the corrala. That is a kind of typology of a very typical Spanish typology that where this building was, where this apartment was based. And the corrala is a traditional housing typology that has an enormous also material heritage, a physical heritage that has been lost, which it's about it's a socializing space. It's a very important socializing space because of these balcony corridors, for example, and because of a central courtyard. Mm-hmm. And this makes a very particular typology that in this case, in this building, it was a kind of mutilated corrala. It was made of the 60s. It has these balcony corridors when people socialize a lot, because in Spain there is the everyday tradition to put the clothes to dry outside, so people socialize and so on. But so it is used in that way, but not about the patio, no? So we were wondering, for example, in this particular project, how to rethink this socializing aspect of the corrala, but not in the building, because we were not able to work in the building, but from the interior design. Mm-hmm. So we decided that in this case, for example, of the set of the garden, which we work together with very much with Jaime, this we were gonna plant more cherry tomatoes on the ground that could make a kind of excess of food that we could share. I mean, he's also very engaged with elderly people that is in the building and so on. So as a kind of provision of a kind of device that could become a kind of socializing device that could make, instead of encapsulating the food production of the home, become a kind of socializing device. And actually, what has happened, which is even also more interesting, is that he has started to retake all previous experiences of food, responsible food that he was part of because with his ex-boyfriend, but then he broke up, so he was a bit a part of that, and the new vegetable garden reconnect him with all these experiences, and he made a family with two neighbors, with two girls neighbors, because in Madrid you have these buckets, no, of baskets of food, and it was too much for him, so they made a family out of that. So you see that the device of this architectural device, no, you were mentioning this case of this little plant pot. Vegetable plots became also as a socializing device and a device for new imbricated relations where the bulldog is involved with Jaime and his fiancés or meeting encounters or whatever, but also the neighbors that create new relationships. And for us it's a very critical issue also related with climate change, how we are socially involved, how we can really create, think and engage with new ideas of community, no? Since it's a collective issue, how we can really think of these imbricated dimensions, no? And there are a lot of different struggles together, no? And how we can relate the climate issues and not taking it, not seeing them separated from social issues and so on. I think these architectural devices have a lot of potentials. Sometimes we are not really aware of transforming, no? And sometimes can be really, really small.
A ver, para mí es importante el volver a preguntarse las cosas.
For me, it's important to come back to re-ask things,
Desaprender un poco
to unlearn a bit,
y volver a mirar las cosas de otra manera.
and to try and look at things a different way.
Un aspecto muy importante para mí
One important aspect for me
es la toma de conciencia, la concientización hacia todos.
is making the conscious awareness of everyone,
Y así poder hablar de distintos aspectos de la vida.
and to be able to talk about distinct parts of life.
Por ejemplo, la consideración del pasado.
For example, the consideration of the past,
O sea, que hubo gente atrás nuestro y
that there were people before
y
us,
que generaron conocimiento.
and that generated understanding and knowledge.
También el posicionarnos en el territorio en el que vivimos.
Also to position ourselves in the land in which we live,
También el considerar las dinámicas sociales
and to consider social dynamics,
y entender qué puede generar la gente
and to understand that people can
desde
generate
sus pequeños grupos sociales.
within their own small social groups.
También fomentar el bien común.
Also to strengthen or to grow the common good,
Generar conocimiento que pueda servir para todos.
and
también.
to create knowledge that is beneficial to all.
Y con cierta anarquía también
And with a certain anarchy,
entender que el recurso humano no es el recurso económico no es lo más importante,
that economic resources are not necessarily the most important,
sino el pensamiento y el recurso humano.
but the thought and also the human resource
Y
itself.
repensarse las cosas, o sea,
To rethink things,
hacer arquitectura es complejo, se requiere de muchos
To do
recursos
to do architecture is complex and it requires a lot of resources.
y puedes conseguirlo de otra manera.
And you can find it in different ways.
Basta abrir los ojos y ver qué es lo que te ofrece
Just
el
stop and-
territorio o la ciudad,
Stop, open your eyes and see what the land offers you, what the city offers you,
y hacer arquitectura con la menor cantidad de recursos
and
posibles.
to do architecture with the minimal amount of resources necessary,
Optimizar ciertas prácticas
and to optimize certain practices
para no utilizar demasiada energía
in order to not use so much energy,
y replantearse sobre las cosas que no están funcionando bien en la sociedad.
and to replant things that aren't working so well within society.
In a way, the discussion of climate change is bringing back this dispute, this classical dispute in social sciences between the qualitative and the quantitative, like the calculation versus the qualification or the characterization. In your case, there's kind of an assemblage of both ways of analyzing. But I want to talk now about the qualitative dimension of design, which often is not that much understood when discussed climate change, for instance. For instance, there's a number of things that you've been, certain stances, I would say, that you both have been taken. Like, for instance, move away from the notion of nature as available resources, from extractive economies, to ones that are kind of confronting this idea that Timothy Norton is presented, or kind of aligned with it, of agrologistics and criticism that he does, more coexistence and discussing the limits of coexistence. That's one of them. The other is this way of constructing a sense of, for instance, belonging, as Daniel was saying, that is not that much as something that is built up through nationalism, but is constructed through forms of associability. The third one that has to do with the allocation of life, not as something that is individualistic, but more aligned, I would say, for instance, with the thinking of people like Rossi Braidotti, as something that is allocated in ecosystems where technology, culture, aesthetics, materiality, non-materiality, it's assembled together. I would like to discuss this because somehow the kind of hegemony of kind of the numeric is often hiding a little bit or shadowing a little bit the need for certain qualitative stances when it comes to do a transition to a paradigm of ecological paradigm or re-engagement with environmental.
That's a great question. I mean, yeah, as you said, we are trying to work in both ways, like doing a research that is qualitative and quantitative, and also in relation to this assemblage and to this kind of imbrication of different factors that create climate change. What we have also or not find, but we have been trying to test is the possibility of using some certain devices which work to open up, to connect with the complexity of those juxtaposing factors that you are describing, no? Such as, for example, in the case of the project in Cali, we like and we work with many kinds of insects, but butterflies and hummingbirds, they do have an appeal that it's something that can connect easier with the more, let's say, complex issues that are behind. Why are they disappearing? Why are they affected by different factors? Which in a way, it's a product of this extractive economy, no? And the fact that arable land is kind of becoming like expanded, and the agri-logistic project, which has been there for 12,000 years, it's a continuous expansion, and every time that there is an innovation in technology, is basically to expand it, like to intensify it more, no? So for us, this the fact that the people are using this in a wedding, it's a way to connect with this sort of complexity that you are describing, and create a sense of proximity with that other reality, which, for example, has happened, like when at the beginning of some of the environmental movements in the world, there was this story of the trafficking of feathers of tropical birds, which were imported to the U.S. and to the UK and to many places in Europe, to be used as an adornment in the heads of people, like upper class and women and middle upper class. And then suddenly, that kind of opened up a reflection about like the origin of those feathers and how those that extraction was affecting those ecosystems. And suddenly, that was connected also with the race of the first one of the first agencies or organizations to protect the environment was the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, and somehow that. Apparently banal thing, something related to fashion in New York and London, suddenly became like a trigger element for this sort of collective action towards the protection of nature. And that banned, actually, at the beginning of the 20th century, the commercial transactions of these feathers, which, I mean, there's many things behind that, because they were really affecting some people were arguing that they would not affect the populations in the places of origin, but actually they did, but it was measured. So there's another very interesting of these layers is how knowledge is produced, where is it produced, how is it measured, and that, but then it's a
Voy a intentar responder con todo lo que he entendido.
I'm going to try and respond with whatever I've understood.
Siento que todo es muy empírico en
I think everything is very empirical.
Tenemos baja tecnología, es un país en desarrollo.
We have a low technology and it's a developing country.
Y entonces no hay modelos ideales
there aren't ideal models that we should say
para aplicar en la realidad ecuatoriana,
to apply within the Ecuadorian reality,
sino que más bien se utilizan ciertos modelos en los que no corresponden a la realidad.
But we use certain models that don't necessarily correspond to the reality.
Y entonces esos modelos me parece que no logran articularse bien con la realidad.
And I think those don't necessarily articulate well with what reality is.
Y entonces nosotros tenemos un pensamiento de medio ambiente.
We have a thought of the environment.
De acuerdo a lo que pensamos que debería ir, digamos, estos conceptos.
And how we think they should go in terms of these concepts.
Entonces intentamos reducir la energía y tener energía limpia.
And so we try to reduce energy consumption and have clean energy.
Sin embargo,
however,
digamos, socialmente no se está persiguiendo eso de una forma muy directa.
So that's not following us necessarily in a direct form.
Sino que más bien el desarrollo es como un monstruo que no le importa eso.
Development is kind of like a monster and has no concern for that.
Y nosotros también estamos haciendo poco todavía.
And we're doing a little bit so far.
Necesitamos que se multipliquen las ideas
we need the ideas to multiply.
Y otra vez la toma de conciencia.
And also to take that into account of awareness.
Entender que no hay que consumir los bosques primarios.
So we shouldn't, consume the primary forest.
Pero nosotros no tenemos una producción, digamos, de bosques para poder trabajar en la arquitectura.
But we don't have necessarily the forest that we can work well in terms of architecture.
Entendemos que ha habido invasiones de ciertas especies, como por ejemplo el eucalipto.
So we also understand that there has been a certain invasion in terms of species, for example, eucalyptus.
Y entonces en esta zona andina entendemos que deberíamos ocupar esta madera.
And so in this Andes region, we understand that we should use this type of wood.
Y y sembrar nuevamente plantas que correspondan a los ecosistemas nativos.
And to plant plants that belong in their native environments and their ecosystems.
También entendemos todo lo que estamos produciendo de basura y cómo modificamos los territorios para generar botaderos de basura.
And so we also need to understand what we're using in terms of trash and how we're using landfills and using those spaces.
Entonces, en muchos casos intentamos reducir la basura que generamos.
And we're trying to reduce the amount of trash that we're creating.
Necesitamos ha habido un aprendizaje en ver cómo hacían antes las construcciones también.
There's been a learning in looking back and how things were built.
Porque la gente que tiene escasos recursos y que está regada en el territorio,
Because the people that have scarce resources and that are spread out throughout the land,
construye con lo que tiene alrededor.
they build with what they have around them.
Y eso es un aprendizaje muy grande.
And that's a large learning.
También el trabajo en agua me parece que debe tomar más valor.
And I think working in water, it needs to have more value.
Y actualmente tenemos mucha cantidad de agua, entonces
In actuality, we have a large quantity of water.
no nos enfrentamos todavía a los problemas.
We haven't confronted necessarily the problems.
Y siento que es importante comenzar a trabajar en ello.
And I think it's important to start to work with that.
Eso.
Let's go to open it to the audience.
So I was commenting on Hake's architecture mechanism and how he talks about what my point of view is that this architecture mechanism that's being presented in this panel is very real and very applicable, and it can be applied as we saw. So what I was offering was this idea of seeing these architectural mechanisms being applied and being implemented in terms of a drawing, for example, in their case, where it's a drawing where a whole city or a whole town is made from the project that we've seen. And then on their end as well, this architectural mechanism that can be replicated. And it's very real and can be seen in a space like Madrid and then all of Spain, etc. So it's this idea of moving away from the production of the architectural mechanism and then responding to it more of like its application.
Yeah.
Diego, you want to say something?
No, yeah, I think as architects we have to look and engage with the realities that we are confronted in multiple dimensions, and how every project, even if it has a kind of a quantitative aspect which looks like small, no, can have a strong catalytic effect, and that's why this qualitative aspect is so fundamental, no, and also because the problems that we face are embodied, are materialized in very specific situations and in very concrete situations, and every situation is so different from each other. And we talk about climate change. It's not generic when our bodies feel it, and we feel it in so many different ways, no? And it's not the same from someone from the tropical rainforest, or someone in the north of Europe, or someone or very specific, or someone who is wealthy or someone who is not wealthy. So then the solutions also have to be tackled in the same way as the problem, no? And coming back to your proposal, no? And when you introduce the panel, this idea of the situated is because the problems are very much situated.
Yeah.
I mean, the struggles are very much situated. So this is why we have to make also situated solutions. It's just because this is a reality we are facing it, no?
Yeah.
It's very specific. So it's how to be able put our energies in projects that somehow, even if we have little power as architects, and it can be somehow multiplied, or it can be somehow has other kind of possibilities, no, beyond the specific apparent materiality around the limited object, no, which is more kind of expanded object that functions in many other scales and in many different dimensions that we have to, I think, be very much aware of. And I think climate change really put this issue on the table. No, it's so specific. No, and for example, we cannot deal with climate change without dealing with social issues, with gender issues as well. For example, if we think about the colonization in Latin America, it was this colonization of climate that it brings also a racial colonization. There was a racial issue as well. There was a racialization of people as well, coming together with this colonization of species, of nature, etc. No, and a gender as well was created. No, there was these laws of 1512 of Leyes de Burgos, the laws of Burgos, in which all gender issues were stipulated. How Indian women has to cover themselves, their bodies, because of course for moral issues, and they had to marry Indian men, and they had to serve their Indian husband in their house. No, so it was a kind of there is Maria Lugones, no, another feminist Latin American thinkers, very important, that shows how really and make us understand that the colonization of climate came very much about other kinds of colonizations, other kind of social, and this is this idea of imbricated struggles that we have to also face, no? And for us, it's really important, really, to engage with these different kind of dimensions of also of the architectural devices that we are dealing with, no? In different kind of situations.
Yeah, maybe also in relation to your question, which I think is very interesting, very good question. It's this in a moment in which communities are more dispersed, and the way in which collectivity is built. We also have to find other ways to create new ways to bring people together, we never saw these actions as not being, let's say, political, for example, because they were not in a public plaza. I mean, anything can be something that deals with power structures, like the way that you use water to water your plants could be one decision that has many implications, because actually that water is irrigated with 40 liters of water, and a person consumes 120 liters per day. And if you go to there is a project in the City Hall of Madrid which wants to implement people to make more gardens in their homes, and if you add that to the pressure on the water deposits in the city, then that's which are already exhausted because of climate change, then you're gonna have an even more unbalanced situation. So we see those more like as a sort of actions in swarms, that they could just be replicable. They are imperfect, but they have this potential of being tested in this scale, and then maybe grow to other places and areas. And that's also why we also find important to use other media, like in other projects that we didn't show today, for example, but where we are testing how to use a photo soap opera, for example, fotonovela, to discuss issues among communities who are maybe familiarized with that type of media and not maybe with sitting here in a panel, or people who don't go to natural history museums, but they go and shop a T-shirt, no? And then so that is also a way to try to work with this broader context that you are also describing.
Yeah. Yo he asimilado que los arquitectos, al menos donde yo trabajo en mi país, no tienen una incidencia importante
I have assimilated that architects do not necessarily have I have assimilated that architects don't necessarily have this incidence.
Y que nuestra práctica es como muy chiquita, muy mínima.
And that our practice is very small and very minimal.
Y entonces siento que los proyectos privados sí son una referencia para preguntarse cómo podrían hacerse ciertas prácticas.
And so I think that these smaller private projects can be a way to ask ourselves how to do something in terms of greater practices.
Pero creo que, a ver, el cambio real
But the real change
debería ser hacer arquitectura pública.
is to do public architecture
Que llegue para todos,
that is available for all,
que se pueda hablar sobre estos temas y que
and that we
todos
can
lo
talk
podamos
about
palpar.
all these issues and that we can all talk about it and touch it.
También pienso que el exhibir estos proyectos ayudan a multiplicar y a que la gente conozca acerca de ellos.
I think also in exhibiting these projects it helps people to understand and to familiarize themselves with it.
El desarrollo siento que va en contra de lo que se debería hacer por un cambio climático.
And I feel like development goes against what we should be doing for the things around the environment.
Y entonces en esta inteligencia colectiva de toda la sociedad,
In this collective intelligence around society, I feel
siento que nos queda mucho por recorrer todavía y
there's a lot for us to still keep going.
Y hay cosas importantes que hay que entender.
And there are a lot of things for us to still understand.
Por ejemplo, la arquitectura sí es como muy destructora como concepción.
Architecture could be a destroyer in terms of concepts.
Entonces, entender que se puede construir con materiales locales o materiales de tierra.
And so building with local materials or structures made of earth.
Creo que si se llega a transmitir eso,
if we can transmit that,
es como haber ganado bastante.
We will have gained a lot.
Siento que son realidades muy complejas.
I think they're very complex realities.
Y que nos quedan grandes aprendizajes todavía para poder desarrollar soluciones.
And there's a lot for us to learn in terms of developing solutions.
It's been a long day, amazing. We have so many things to bring with us. What is very important for us in regards to these summits is the possibility to accumulate new knowledge, to put it together and articulating it. For us, it's very important to bring different voices so we can talk from a innovation point of view, from the way that online platforms can articulate new forms to access knowledge, to understand what is the way that ecology get articulated with economy, with even other notions of market, to see particular experiments in which basically the whole design became a little bit of a laboratory, like all these accumulated new forms of dealing with or engaging with environmental issues. It's what we're trying to collect and articulate to these summits. So it's been already quite amazing. Thank you so much for these great presentations and work, and thank you very much to all of you for being part of this discussion. We'll have more coming soon, but now we can do other things. Thank you very much.